A little girl was happily skipping rope with other girls when a boy ran over holding scissors to cut the rope and teased Park Mi-jung. But suddenly the boy fell into an open manhole and was severely injured. Sometime later, after she had grown a bit, Park Mi-jung again received a gift from a boy to express his feelings. After that, the boy rode his bicycle home. But immediately, Park Mi-jung heard a loud crash because that boy had been hit by a car and one of his legs was broken. That day, when Park Mi-jung was at church, a senior from the upper class came by and waved at her, making her feel shy and delighted. A moment later, this guy called Park Mi-jung's name, gave her an English notebook he had written by hand, and said he was about to move up to Seoul because he had passed Hankook University and he had heard she ranked first in class this time, hoping they would attend the same university someday. Suddenly, this young man collapsed to the ground and foamed at the mouth. The priest realized he had been stung by a hornet and piggybacked Woo-jung to the hospital for emergency treatment. The next day was also the opening ceremony of the new school year, and Park Mi-jung no longer saw Woo-jung because he had left the village. A while later, when Park Mi-jung walked into class 12A3, all the boys became excited to be in the same class again with the pretty girl. The girl sitting behind loudly asked Park Mi-jung whether, on the day Woo-jung had the accident, she had been talking with him. The girl Seo Dae-eun bluntly asked whether Lee Dong-jin's injury was because of her. At that moment, Dong-won walked in and suggested the two girls stop interrogating Park Mi-jung like a criminal, saying that Lee Dong-jin had recovered and had long since ridden off on his motorbike. This boy also set a carton of milk on the desk as a gift for Park Mi-jung. The next day, the teacher announced that as many as 12 boys in their class had food poisoning, while the girls were all fine, and everyone again turned their eyes toward Park Mi-jung. After that, when Park Mi-jung was about to go home, it began to rain. At that moment, Dong-hwan came over and suggested Park Mi-jung share his umbrella to go home, despite her refusing. But Dong-hwan kept persuading her, saying they shared the same way home so it would be convenient, and Park Mi-jung ended up sharing the umbrella with him. Then, as the two walked along the road, a car sped past, so Dong-hwan dodged and brushed his shoulder against Park Mi-jung. When they were near Park Mi-jung's house, the boy said that actually his house was in the opposite direction from the school, and that about the food poisoning, the boys had been chattering about her, saying she was very good at English and also pretty. Suddenly, a bus passed by, so Dong-won used the umbrella to block the splash from a puddle. But the girl's expression was full of worry. After that, the boy bravely said he liked her, then handed the umbrella to Park Mi-jung and ran home alone through the rain. Right after that, a thunderclap rang out, but it was quite far away, so the schoolgirl breathed a sigh of relief. But as she started walking, peals of thunder at a nearer distance crashed in, so Park Mi-jung let the umbrella fall as if accepting something. Immediately after, the family brought a memorial photo of the boy Dong-hwan to the school because he had been struck by lightning to death on the way home from school, and Park Mi-jung stood apart in a corner and joined her schoolmates in a moment of silence to remember the ill-fated student as the funeral car circled the schoolyard performing rites. Then all the students in the school buzzed about how too many accidents had happened lately, some with broken arms and legs, some hit by cars, and now even someone dead from lightning. At that moment, the male student Lee Dong-jin kept casting his eyes toward Park Mi-jung. After everyone had gone back into their classrooms, Lee Dong-jin lingered to gaze at Park Mi-jung and noticed that she was crying alone. After that, Lee Dong-jin heard classmates gossiping non-stop that Becca, use of that girl Park Mi-jung, those accidents and the recent death had happened, that the senior Woo-jung, who had passed Hankook University at our school, had been stung by hornets at church and then had an accident, that they had heard Park Mi-jung was there then, that anyone involved with that girl would surely be dogged by misfortune and bad luck, that the class had even given her the nickname Witch, and that the place where Dong-hwan was struck by lightning was also near her house. While the friends all shuddered hearing this, Lee Dong-jin showed he did not believe the rumor and offered many reasons that the accidents or the lightning strike were only coincidences. At that moment, the discipline teacher came in and asked everyone to stop gossiping, so they buried their heads again in their studies. But Lee Dong-jin still could not stop thinking about what he had heard. Sometime later, the school organized a camping trip. While she was sitting, eating alone, the boy Jun Seo came over and handed Park Mi-jung a can of drink. The girl accepted the can but said she did not want to hear what Jun Seo wanted to say and hurried off to avoid him. At that time, Lee Dongjin volunteered to be the photographer to capture playful images of his friends. But when the solitary image of Park Emi-jung entered his lens, he became distracted and forgot his main task. After that, the boy turned the camera squarely toward the girl sitting in the back. At that moment, the teacher piggybacked a male student with an injured leg and rushed away. The friends recognized the injured one as Park Jun-yeol of class 12A3, and Lee Dongjin also noticed the dazed expression of the girl Park Emi-jung. The next day, Lee Dongjin went to the Photoshop to pick up the developed pictures and was delighted looking at his friends' mischievous shots. But when he saw Park Emi-jung's image, he feared she would not be happy if she learned he had photographed her. The next day at lunch, the male student Jung Seo hobbled away on crutches because he had broken his leg on the camping trip and shot a rather displeased look toward Park Emi-jung. At that time, Lee Dongjin passed by the classroom and again looked toward Park Emi-jung sitting alone inside. The male student, Jun Seo, also spoke up to urge his friends to be careful with the person sitting in the classroom, which made Lee Dongjin feel even more pity for the schoolgirl he had long had his eye on. And so, the boys at school kept on encountering mishaps and sudden accidents, and all the boys began to avoid Park Emi-jung as if she were cursed. The girl kept hearing gossip about herself, that anyone who liked that girl would get hurt or even lose his life. The girl, Seo Dayan, also gestured to classmates that his mother had also died right after giving birth to him, that Park Emi-jung really was a witch. Park Emi-jung heard this talk but quietly went back to her seat. That noon, Lee Dongjin saw Park Emi-jung eating alone on the bench in front of the storage shed and using her hand to block the sun, so he went to his mother's pesticide shop and enthusiastically got to work helping out. And his mother realized her only son wanted money. Lee Dongjin took the chance to say that the bench in front of the school's storage shed had no sunshade, that they often sat there but the glare was too strong, and that he had heard autumn sun exposure easily causes skin cancer. Hearing the word cancer, his mother started to worry and promised to donate as the head of the Parents' Association. With her only son afraid of getting cancer, how could she ignore it? So he kissed his mother on the cheek and quickly slipped away without helping anymore. The next day, Park Emi-jung again brought her lunch to the old bench and wondered when the canopy had been installed, while Lee Dongjin felt very happy for having done something useful for the girl he always watched. And then winter came, and that day as she was walking, a male student suddenly called Park Emi-jung's name and introduced himself as Park Sang-ho from class 12A7. When the girl turned her face to leave, the boy said that Dongwon's death was not her fault, that in fact that day he had seen her and Donghwa sharing one umbrella on the way home, and he himself had been on the bus passing by, and asked if she thought that if she had not walked with Donghwan that day he would not have died, and that from then on she had skulked around alone, even not daring to eat at the canteen, and that it was just his ill fate, not her fault. Suddenly, 3 girls walked past and saw Park Emi-jung talking with a male student. When the 3 schoolgirls had left, Park Sang-ho asked Park Emi-jung to blame it on the rain, that the lightning struck because of the storm. But she grew angry and left first, so Sang-ho walked his bicycle to follow. A moment later, Sang-ho mustered his courage and told Park Emi-jung that he actually liked her, that if he did not confess, he would regret it later. When Park Emi-jung coldly refused, Sang-ho hurriedly pedaled ahead. Right then, the high-voltage line shorted out. Sang-ho fell as a live wire dropped, wrecking everything around, and the high-voltage wire touched Sang-ho's body, felling him as Park Emi-jung could only stand there in anguish and watch. After that, the family carried the memorial portrait of the student Park Sang-ho out of the school. Lee Dongjin heard classmates whisper that that boy had met Park Emi-jung at the township pharmacy and then suffered the fatal accident, giving them even more reason to believe Park Emi-jung was a witch and that it was best not to go near her if they wished to stay alive. When the moment of silence ended, Lee Dongjin again was the one who stayed behind to look toward Park Emi-jung with compassion, but the schoolgirl seemed not to register his presence. A while later, once in class, Lee Dongjin looked out the window and saw that Park Emi-jung was only just then walking away. The girl looked at the bench where she often sat and read many harsh lines aimed at her. Witch of class 12, A3, get out, don't come around again. Reading these words pained Park Mi-jung, so she walked out of the school under the watching eyes of Lee Dongjin. When Park Mi-jung turned back to gaze wistfully at her school, Lee Dongjin vowed to himself that he would have to speak to that girl and kept longing for the recess bell so he could say a simple line, "Hi, I'm Lee Dongjin." But in the end, Lee Dongjin still could not say it. The next morning, her father angrily flung open the door and loudly asked Park Mi-jung why she had skipped school and where she had thrown her school bag. But the daughter just lay there motionless. Right after that, her father went to the school and stopped the schoolgirl Seo Da-eun to ask a few things. After learning that his daughter was being called a witch, the father asked who had masterminded it. But the girl who had once called Park Mi-jung a witch only shook her head and said that actually everyone saw it that way. Then the father went into the classroom to retrieve his daughter's bag. When he opened the locker to take Park Mi-jung's things, the father's tears began to fall. A moment later, as he stepped out of the school, he saw a male student doing something to the bench. When the father asked, Lee Dongjin said that because those kids kept scribbling, he was cleaning it off. Park Mi-jung's father asked about the rumor of a witch at the school. Lee Dongjin affirmed it was only baseless gossip, that she was absolutely not a witch, that he did not yet know how to prove it, but if given some time, he would surely find a way. Although the answer was rather non-committal, the father was glad that at least someone believed his daughter was not a witch. When Lee Dongjin asked who he was, Park Mi-jung's father merely said he hoped the boy would find a way as he had said, then took Park Mi-jung's bag and left. Sometime later, Park Mi-jung still chose to root herself in her room and did not dare step outside, so her father could only remind his daughter to keep eating properly before heading back to the fields. But the rumor that Park Mi-jung was a witch spread quickly into every corner of the village, so the father burst into a house, dragged a man out into the street, and shouted, asking if he had been Jestu, ring and spreading lies about his daughter. Just then, Lee Dongjin's mother drove her truck past and stopped to gawk. The neighbor apologized, saying he had been heartsick because his son was injured, so Park Mi-jung's father shoved him down and said, "My daughter is my very life." He loudly demanded that the neighbor ladies stop sitting there and peddling filthy rumors about his poor Park Mi-jung, or he would make them pay. After the father left, Lee Dongjin's mother asked what was going on, and two aunties said they had heard the man's daughter seduced boys, that the boys at Mi-dong High kept getting into so many accidents it was frightening, and that her son also attended Mi-dong High, so she should warn him to be careful. Hearing that, Lee Dongjin's mother could not help worrying. When the father got home, the daughter asked him to buy some cat food. The father said cats were all bad luck and should be chased away, but Park Mi-jung said, "I'm the same." Then she went back to her room. When Lee Dongjin's mother was tidying the shop, she nearly jumped out of her skin seeing the uncle who had just argued show up. When Park Mi-jung's father asked to buy cat food, the shopkeeper said she did not sell it but that her son seemed to have kept a little, then handed the father a bag of cat food and refused payment, so he asked if she thought he was pitiful, set down the money to pay, and left. A moment later, when her father brought her the bag of cat food, Park Mi-jung was very happy. Then the father said, "It's been so long since I saw you laugh, keep smiling, dear." And then the graduation ceremony at Mi-dong High for the boys and girls took place. Lee Dongjin's mother could not hold back her emotion as her only son graduated from high school. Lee Dongjin felt awkward because his mother showed up in a flashy outfit. Right after that, Lee Dongjin came to Park Mi-jung's house, but saw Seo Da-eun standing at the door, hesitating to knock. After Seo Dong's left, Lee Dongjin came over and saw a bouquet and the graduation yearbook placed at the door. He was about to set down his own bouquet when Park Mi-jung opened the door, so Lee Dongjin hurriedly slipped away. The girl glimpsed the figure of a boy and thought he was the one who had left the gift. Park Mi-jung opened the yearbook and saw that all her friends had graduated, and her own photo had been pasted beside the class picture. Then her father urged her to go back to school, saying she was smart and, if she tried, she could get into university, that they should go to X together, that from now on he would not drive the truck anymore but would look at Namsan Tower instead of digging potatoes. Suddenly, the father had a bout of toothache from periodontitis, but he still did not want to go to the dentist, saying that if the potato crop hit this season, they would save a little and he would even sell all the fields to buy a home, and that when they got to Seoul, he would get his teeth treated that very day, and that if they moved to Seoul, they would set up a potato patch on the rooftop. Seeing how much her father was counting on her, Park Emi-jung decided to return to study to prepare for the aptitude exam. Late the next night, Park Emi-jung decided to go to the fields to help her father plant seed potatoes, because after his quarrel with the village, no one would help him anymore. The father said, "Let's treat today as our one and only date," and the two of them pulled the cart out to the fields. A while later, while helping her father carry the seed potatoes, Park Emi-jung saw a venomous snake appear, trembled and called for her father, and dropped the tub of potatoes. Then she received a bite from the venomous snake. When the father ran over, the snake slithered away. He saw the bite on his daughter's leg and tried to rouse her. A moment later, Park Emi-jung opened her eyes. Her leg had been banded to slow the spread of venom, while the father had turned blue from sucking the poison out for her. The girl realized that because her father had suffered periodontitis for a long time, the venom was spreading faster. Park Emi-jung cried out for help. The father stopped her, afraid people would keep gossiping about his daughter, and told her to hurry home, saying he was truly sorry, that if she had not spoken up, this foolish father would have known nothing, and that she must absolutely not let anyone know about this, his beautiful, obedient daughter. At that moment the villagers hurried over, so Park Emi-jung promised she would not let anyone know her father had taken the blow in her stead, and then her father collapsed. But Park Emi-jung kept on being called a witch who had caused even her father's death, so she packed all her things to leave the village as a way to run away, while Lee Dong-jin continued his studies at Hankook University. That day, when the statistics class began, Professor Huang asked everyone to introduce themselves. Lee Dong-jin had to go first. He stood up to introduce himself, and the professor asked why he had chosen statistics. Seeing the student falter, Professor Huang continued. He asked if he dreamed of becoming a civil servant at Statistics Korea. He said that if he wanted to make money, he should become an insurance valuation specialist, an actuary, rather than a low-paid civil servant. He added that if he did not want a future like the professors, he should not bother with graduate school. When the professor was about to call on someone else, Lee Dong-jin said he had come to statistics because there was a problem in his life that he had to solve with statistics. Professor Huang meant to ask what that life problem was. Instead, he loudly called out to a student trying to slip out of class and told him to introduce himself. The young man said, "I'm Kim Dong-hub." Later at lunch, Lee Dong-jin brought his tray to sit with new friends. They kept gossiping about the boy eating alone over there. They said that at first he seemed quiet and cool, so many people liked him. But now everyone hated him because he never returned anyone's greeting. That was why he had not a single friend. Lee Dong-jin tried to steer the topic elsewhere, but they still went on about the eccentric guy. When he looked toward Kim Dong-hub, he remembered Park Emi-jung's lonely figure from long ago. He told his friends they were wrong. He then carried his tray over to sit with Kim Dong-hub. He talked non-stop to introduce himself, even held out his hand, but got no response. He kept chattering away, hoping to find the same wavelength. But Kim Dong-hub coldly stood up. Lee Dong-jin could not swallow his food for sheer embarrassment. That evening, while he was working part-time at the convenience store, he saw Kim Dong-hub passing by and waved. The other merely turned his head and walked off. Lee Dong-jin grabbed a bag of potatoes and ran after him to give it, saying it was from his mother back in the countryside. That left the eccentric young man surprised and puzzled. The next day, after class ended, Lee Dong-jin again chatted him up and asked Kim Dong-hub to go eat Chinese food together. Kim Dong-hub asked why he was treating him like this. Normally, if someone got no response, they would take the hint and back off. Since Lee Dong-jin would not, he felt uncomfortable. When Kim Dong-hub turned to leave, Lee Dong-jin said he reminded him of someone. He had not done this before because he had lacked the courage. He did not want to repeat the same mistake, and if it made him uncomfortable, he apologized. Right after that, the two sat in the same eatery but at different tables. Kim Dong-hup asked why he worked so many part-time jobs. Was it because of family hardship? Lee Dong-jin said he wanted to buy online courses and prep materials. It was not because he wanted to retake the college exam himself, but because he wanted to help someone else retake it. Then Lee Dong-jin slurped down his jjajangmyeon, tied on an apron, and said he also worked there. He dove into cleanup as his shift began. When two of Lee Dong-jin's friends came out of class and tried to change course to avoid Kim Dong-hup, Lee Dong-jin cheerfully kept up the conversation. He asked about his plans for the coming break. Hearing he wanted to work part-time, Lee Dong-jin said they should work together. From then on, the friendship between Lee Dong-jin and Kim Dong-hup began. Sometime later, Lee Dong-jin took a bus home to visit. He went to his mother's pesticide shop. He was hugged and kissed on the cheek in welcome. He responded in kind to please her. He was treated to a lavish meal as if it were his birthday. When she asked why he had not come the moment summer vacation started, he said he had to work to build social skills. He then told her he had made a close friend named Kim Dong-hup. The boy was quiet but very trustworthy. Whenever he looked at him, he remembered a girl whose GPA had been over 4.3. Hearing this, his mother confiscated the food. She said she had suspected his part-time jobs, that with a little money he would have no mind left for studies. She said she had struggled to get him into college, and now he did not even have 5 points. He laughed and asked if she thought he meant 4.3 out of 100 like in high school. A little later, he went to his room to look through old photos he had taken with friends. When he paused on a picture of Park Mi-jung, his mother walked in. He hid the photos. She asked him to go greet the aunties, saying the laundry shop's son was in the hospital and he should pay a visit. When he asked why, she said wasn't there a rumor at his school about a witch girl? The girl's father had died months ago. Han-gil from the laundry had gone to comfort her, and on the way back was gored by a wild boar. Seeing such things, maybe the girl really was a witch, as rumored. Lee Dong-jin shouted that she was not a witch. People could be hurt or die for many reasons. Blaming her made no sense. By the numbers last year, the country had 247,000 deaths, 677 a day, about 5 per 1,000 people. With 200 people at Mi-dong High, there would be 5 to 6 deaths a year. In the last 3 years, there had been only 2, so it was all coincidence. When he picked up a bag to go find Park Mi-jung, his mother said the girl had probably already gone. Months earlier, the village had held a meeting and unanimously decided to demand that she move away. They had all gone to her house. Lee Dong-jin rushed to Park Mi-jung's home. He saw a notice that the house was for urgent sale. He opened the door and went inside but had no chance to give her what he had long prepared. He took out his report on mortality rates to refute the existence of a witch. He set it down in frustration, and the papers fluttered in the wind. He missed her and broke down in tears over the unspoken love he had not managed to confess. Sometime later, Professor Huang summoned the student to his office and asked why he was so diligent. He said most guys just coasted since their minds would reset to zero after military service anyway. The more earnest they seemed, the more likely they were to quit later. When Lee Dong-jin insisted he would not give up, the professor asked if the witch mentioned in his report was an imaginary figure. Lee Dong-jin said there was someone being misunderstood and he wanted to clear that person's name. Professor Huang praised the idea of using statistics on the village's spate of accidents and deaths to make the case. But he said that from the outset the report was useless because it was riddled with errors. He said that Lee Dong-jin had applied statistics subjectively. He had preset the answer, not a witch, and forced the numbers to prove it. He told him to review all the questions on the list. Then he might learn whether the person was a witch or not. He had to start again from the starting line. Lee Dong-jin nodded and began digging to answer the questions. He found that the mortality rate at Mi-dong High was higher than at other schools. He searched for geographic or climatic factors that might explain it but found nothing special. When he faced the question of what the accidents had in common, he thought through them all. He saw that the only common point was the presence of Park Mi-jung. He asked himself whether she really was a witch after all. That night, Kim Dong-hup walked out of the school with an umbrella. He saw his close friend sitting in the pouring rain in the yard. When he held the umbrella over him, Lee Dong-jin said sadly that he was wrong and hadn't found any way at all. Then he sniffled like a child. Time flew, and the two close friends reached their senior year of college. Kim Dong-hup buried himself in studying for the police civil service exam. When Lee Dong-jin went to see Professor Huang, an alumnus handed him a business card from CIS Solution. Afterward, Kim Dong-hup achieved his dream of becoming a detective. Lee Dong-jin became a data analyst at CIS Solution, forever whirling amid numbers and statistics. Sometime later, Lee Dong-jin's mother walked out of a clinic with a stricken face. That evening, she called her son and said it seemed she was ill. The doctor said it was rather serious and told her to go up to Seoul for a thorough exam. Lee Dong-jin reassured her and promised to take her. After he hung up, he sat there in a daze. Sometime later, he entered a hospital room. By then, his mother was putting on a wig because her disease had advanced quickly. He secretly stashed beer in his backpack so she could relive youthful drinking. When she said she wanted to travel the world, he promised that if she got better, he would send her into space, since her son was earning well now. They both laughed, then let the smiles fade and returned to reality. She regretted not going to church when young. She said if there really were a God, she wouldn't be in this near-death state. She told him to start putting things in order, that they should put the house and shop up for sale. While she was lucid, he should do it so he wouldn't be burdened later. She said they were blessed to still have time together because no one went as suddenly as his father had. She said she wanted to be sent off on a flower bier. When he was 5 and the lady across the lane died and was carried on one, he had asked what it was. She had told him it carried her to heaven. He had asked whether Dad would go to heaven on that too. He had said that when she went to heaven, he would carry her on a flower bier. She said he had been so adorable, so now she wanted to leave on a splendid flower bier to go meet his father. She asked if he would do that for her. Lee Dong-jun's eyes brimmed and he nodded. She rested her head on his shoulder and wept. The next day, he met with a real estate broker. When the man said he would sell the house and pesticide shop, Lee Dong-jin said he wanted to keep the house. Suddenly, the man asked about the house rumored to be the witches. No one dared buy it, so his mother had bought the house and their fields as well. Ms. Mi-suk was truly kind, yet Lee Dong-jin had known nothing of this. Later, while massaging his mother, he urged her to believe God was real. He said after all, the odds were 50-50, and if she didn't believe and ended up in heaven, she might be punished. He asked why she had bought Park Mi-jung's house. His mother confessed she had been the one to drive the girl out. She said seeing Park Mi-jung's father shouting at neighbors and learning the supposed witch studied at Mi-dong High had made her terribly worried. Later, cleaning his room, she had seen the photos he'd taken, including ones that showed he had feelings for the witch girl. So she had convened the meeting about expelling Park Mi-jung. When a villager said who knew whether Mr. Trong-soo's snakebite was because of the girl, the aunties refuted him. They said he himself had once gestured that Park Mi-jung was a witch. She stood to say the village needed peace to make a living. Bad luck and witch rumors were choking them, and they had to protect their children. Then she led everyone to Park Mi-jung's house and pounded on the door. Seeing the girl's pitiful state, she softened and went in to talk. Park Mi-jung, eyes brimming, apologized and said she would leave at once. When the aunties doubted it, Lee Dong-jin's mother said the girl would not lie and drew everyone away, casting a look of pity at the witch. That night, as Park Mi-jung struggled with her luggage to depart, Lee Dong-jin's mother drove her truck up and offered to take her to the town bus station. Despite the girl's refusal, Ms. Mi-suk firmly told her to get in. In the cab, she learned the girl had no one to rely on. Park Mi-jung thanked her for treating her kindly all that time and apologized that it was all her fault. The older woman said the girl had only been a kid and she had heartlessly driven her out. Hearing no one dared buy the girl's house, she had bought the house and fields as an apology. She had meant to call the girl back, but she had vanished. When her son said the girl wasn't a witch, she had felt a little lighter, because her capable son had done the math and numbers don't lie. That day, she had gone to the old house and gathered all of Lee Dong-jin's report papers disproving witches. She had seen the exam prep books he meant to give Park Mi-jung. She ironed each page flat and painstakingly read through every entry he had compiled. She told her son that sometimes you suddenly meet the person you need to meet, and when fate arrives, you will meet. She said if one day he met that girl again, he should tell her that his mother very much wanted to apologize. Lee Dongjin sobbed, told her he loved her, and embraced her. Sometime later, Kim Dong-hup came over to look through all of Lee Dongjin's photos. He said he would help contact friends to spread the sad news. Lee Dongjin looked at every picture and reproached himself for always lugging the camera his father had bought and shooting everywhere, yet never taking a single portrait of his mother. How could there not be even one? What a joke, a photography nut who had never taken a photo of his own mother. The most recent picture of her with her son was from graduation, so her portrait was cut from that, and she was born on a beautiful, splendid flower bier, just as she had wished before leaving this world. As he escorted his mother to her resting place, Lee Dongjin looked up at the sky and saw her smiling with contentment, having reached heaven to reunite with his father. Afterward, while sorting his mother's effects, he found the books and the report he had left at Park Emi-jung's house. She had read all his statistics, surely without understanding the complicated symbols, yet now the pages were creased and smudged with her fingerprints. She had read them again and again, and believed wholeheartedly in his badly wrong numbers. That was why, at the hospital, she had said the girl was not a witch, because she had chosen to trust her son's analytic judgment. Time passed in a blur, and Lee Dongjin had now become a specialist in digital data mining and analysis. That day, the analyst strolled through a casino inside a hotel. By looking at gamblers' physical traits, Lee Dongjin predicted their age, occupation, income, and how often they would visit the casino within a month. At that moment, a man in a white shirt was tensely focused on a hand of cards. When he decided to bet everything he had, Lee Dongjin profiled him, an office worker on a salary, likely on his first or second visit to a casino, actually living in a rented apartment in the provinces, driving a mid-range car, earning about 42 million a year WW. No special hobbies, and thus seeking diversion at the casino. The deciding hand ended with the man losing everything. The analyst used this case to explain a gambler's pain point. If a customer loses past that threshold, they won't dare come back. Our company, SIS Solution, has modeled customer data with big data and produced detailed predictions of each customer's pain point. So when the man in white hit that despairing moment, Lee Dongjin signaled a casino staffer. She came over to say the hotel had prepared a special meal just for him, then escorted him to a complimentary dinner to soothe him as he neared that pain point, and even handed him a resort voucher for VIP guests, hoping he would use it next time. Receiving this treatment, the man in white felt somewhat consoled. In the meeting, Director Kang told the analyst that the casino's goal was to funnel as much of the customers' money into its own vaults as possible, and whether people sold their cars or homes was none of their concern. Lee Dongjin replied that instead of letting customers lose everything and never return, they could manage them so they visited regularly, and profits would grow even more. Chairman Lee was very pleased to hear it. After the successful meeting, Lee Dongjin walked out with his senior colleague. Suddenly, the hotel's chairman appeared to praise his impressive proposal. He said people usually used probability and statistics to trick gamblers, but Lee Dongjin advised on how to make them lose less. He told Director Kang to sign a contract and even consider investing in SIS Solution. When the chairman asked whether he played any sports, Lee Dongjin said his only hobby was staying home to read about data analysis. Meanwhile, the man in the white shirt was pawning his car for a stack of cash so he could head back in and try to recoup. Seeing the proposal's effect play out in real time, Chairman Lee handed over his card and promised to treat Lee Dongjin to a meal. A little later, at the parking lot, Lee Dongjin found his windshield smashed to pieces. Reviewing the footage, he saw a masked figure breaking it. The officer said the culprit had clearly targeted the car's owner, so it looked like a personal grudge. Lee Dongjin couldn't identify the masked man. Just then, two young men behind them started shouting and brawling so fiercely that the police struggled to separate the hotheads. The analyst observed the two scrappers and noticed how similar their habits were. When the officer threatened to charge both with assaulting each other, Lee Dongjin quietly told him they probably didn't want to press charges because they might be family. One had a colored detergent blotch on his shoulder, the other the same stain on his sock. It was the same household detergent. People who live together have a 7 times higher probability of sharing habits than outsiders. Both were covered with white pet hair, so their family likely kept a white dog or cat. The officer collected the 2 hair samples for comparison and asked if they were brothers. No sooner had he spoken than a woman's scolding rang out. The 2 men blamed each other for calling mom. Their mother appeared cradling a little dog, apologized for her unfortunate household, and said the boys had been drinking together and ended up fighting. She boxed their ears on the spot, then led both sons home for re-education. Officer Cha praised the data mining expert's talent, no wonder he drove a nice car, and promised to keep investigating who had vandalized Lee Dongjin's vehicle. After that, Lee Dongjin boarded the subway to go home. Suddenly, a young man was calling out, "Park Mi-jung. If you want to reject me, you should at least give a reasonable reason. Why is it dangerous near you?" Many people filmed the public confession on their phones. When he said, "I like you so much," the girl in the cap turned and told the drunk not to confess so recklessly. Lee Dongjin realized this was the very Park Mi-jung he had once watched from afar. He felt his mother's words, "When fate arrives, you will meet," coming true. As he was still reeling from the encounter, the train reached the station. Park Mi-jung stepped off, and Lee Dongjin hurried after her, trying to follow the girl he had pined for since high school. Soon he trailed her into a dark alley and tried to keep out of sight. When Park Mi-jung sensed someone following, he realized he had been shadowing her without thinking. What would he even do when she didn't know who he was? He lost her, walked on to look, then decided to give up, only to spot her a moment later fussing over some cats. He hid and overheard her murmur to them that she was exhausted from living without seeing people. She said she didn't know how to go on or how to disappear. Hearing this filled Lee Dongjin with sorrow. He had always hoped she was living well somewhere, and he hadn't imagined she was living like this. He vowed, in line with his mother's wish, to prove once and for all that she was not a witch. Park Mi-jung added that she had probably hurt one more person today. After that, he followed her until she entered an apartment and switched on the light. The next day at the office, he searched for the incident of the young man causing a scene on the subway and found a recording from the previous night. Right after Park Mi-jung stepped off the train, the drunken young man tried to follow but collapsed with cardiac arrest and was given CPR by a soldier. Lee Dongjin replayed the collapse with a pensive look. That evening, Lee Dongjin met his close friend Kim Dong-hup at a bar and gently asked, "There are always people who are a bit strange in this world, right?" Watching a baseball game on TV, he went on, "Some people watch their team live and the team loses. Some look at the clock and it's 4:44. Some line up at a famous eatery, and when it's their turn, the ingredients run out. Some get to a machine and it breaks, like the MPI law or the S law. This world has odd laws and curses. If someone were hounded by a vicious curse for life, how miserable would that be? But if we understood the rule, could we break it and save that person from the curse? Do you believe witches are real?" Kim Dong-hup heard him but stayed silent. Meanwhile, Park Mi-jung lived in a room apart from the world, painstakingly translating travel videos to make a living. That day, as she translated the scene where Princess Rapunzel suffers a witch's curse, she paused, pensive. After uploading the file to cloud storage, she phoned Ms. Yu Siu. "I've uploaded the French translation." This was the older sister figure who had found her work. When Yu Siu asked why she lived so frugally, Park Mi-jung looked at a photo of a tower and said, "I want to go somewhere." The woman urged her to eat well and keep healthy, and they said goodbye. Then, Park Mi-jung stepped onto the rooftop to gaze at the vast outside. To her, the place she lived and the world beyond felt like 2 separate worlds, and she kept herself confined here. Sometimes she wondered whether she was locking up the world or the world was locking up her. When she needed someone to talk to, she looked at 2 scarecrows and said, "We really are okay, right?" The next day, Lee Dongjin packed up to leave his solution. His senior, Dong-ho, tried to stop him. The analyst promised to finish the half-done projects, but the senior kept after him. Lee Dongjin brought up their loan algorithm for Sehan Bank to help small businesses. The senior said it was already highly accurate. As Lee Dongjin kept walking, the senior offered to raise his equity to 10%. The analyst answered that he wasn't leaving for those things. There was something he had to do, and he feared he'd regret it if he let the chance pass. The senior understood and asked him not to go too far. Right after, Lee Dong-jin looked to rent an apartment and told the agent he wanted the unit on the upper floor. The night he'd followed Park Mi-jung home, he had fixed on the Tama building opposite. The agent said the upstairs unit was already taken and refused his request to view it. He slipped her some cash to show sincerity. She then took him to persuade the convenience store clerk to let him see the unit, but the young man, Sung-min, flatly refused, so the agent gave up and led Lee Dong-jin out. The analyst still refused to quit. The next day, he held the elevator for Sung-min and casually asked, "What kind of TTEOK do you like?" "My family makes rice cakes, so I hate them," came the reply. Later, while Sung-min worked with his head down, Lee Dong-jin approached and asked for a good bento recommendation. Sung-min obliged. Then he asked which drink was the safest bet. The clerk curtly suggested one. After paying, Lee Dong-jin declined, left the bag of food behind, wished Sung-min a good meal, and walked out empty-handed. The following day, he barged in to help Sung-min take out the trash, and a tug-of-war ensued. Seeing the bespectacled man cling like a leech, Sung-min stalked off in annoyance. Lee Dong-jin cheerfully said they'd meet again. Next morning, Sung-min opened his door to find a gift on the floor with a note. "I'm the new tenant in 502. He kicked it aside, knocked on Lee Dong-jin's door, and demanded to know why he was doing this. In the end, he let the man with glasses step into his flat. Lee Dong-jin boldly offered 3 months rent and to cover the moving costs, and soon he had the apartment facing Park Mi-jung's place, while he wrapped up lingering work for senior Dong-ho. The next day, he slipped over to the opposite unit, covertly checked the mail, and snapped a photo of a letter to Park Mi-jung from a publisher. Just then, Ms. Yuseo appeared. Noting his odd behavior, she asked, "Are you looking for someone?" "I'm going to the 3rd floor," he said, and started up to prove it, only to find it was a women's full-body hair removal clinic. He had to go inside to keep up the lie. Later, Yuseo and Park Mi-jung ate barbecue. The older woman wanted to fatten her up a bit, but Park Mi-jung declined. Afterward, she said she was saving to travel. While translating, she had seen a place with few people, Hallstatt in Austria, that felt soothing. The woman encouraged her to work hard and praised the self-sufficient vegetable garden she had grown. Park Mi-jung said she planned to plant potatoes next year, something to look forward to so she could keep living, and when asked why, replied that potatoes grow deep underground on their own, and besides, her father had planted potatoes at the end of his life. The woman said she'd seen her brighter and smiling more lately, and urged her to live well and get ready for Hallstatt. Park Mi-jung thanked Yuseo for creating at-home translation work for her. As Lee Dong-jin was eating noodles at the convenience store, Officer Cha called. They had found the suspect who smashed his car, Lee Jung-ho, now wanted. He ran a paper cup factory that had recently gone bankrupt. He'd nearly secured a loan, but the bank changed its lending rules, and rumor had it a banker let slip that SIZ Solution had developed the approval system. He likely searched the website and found Lee Dong-jin's info. The analyst asked if withdrawing his complaint would cancel the warrant. The officer said at best it would mitigate the sentence, and besides, the man was on the run. As he stood to leave, Lee Dong-jin asked one more thing. If a streetlight kept flickering, whom should he call? He'd seen one blinking along Park Mi-jung's route home. Officer Cha checked with a colleague, who said to report it to the District Facilities Management Office. Lee Dong-jin took note. No sooner had he reached home than a man punched him. "You're Lee Dong-jin from SIZ Solution, right?" The attacker, whom he recognized as the wanted Lee Jung-ho, growled, landing more blows. Sung-min appeared, restrained the man, and told Lee Dong-jin to call the police. Instead, he said to let the man go, whereupon the attacker kicked him again. Seeing Sung-min dialing, Lee Dong-jin pleaded, "Don't call the police." The man shouted that if he'd gotten the loan, he could have paid his debts and his workers' salaries. Everything seemed about to turn out fine, only for you to ruin it at the last minute. Now dozens of mouths will be out on the street. He raised his fist, but seeing the young man offer no resistance, He let his hand drop in helplessness. After that, Lee Dong-jin treated him to a meal at the convenience store. "This is the first time I've been beaten," he said, "and also the first time I've heard the stomach of the man beating me growl. Please take my portion too." The stir-fried pork with kimchi here is the top seller. Most bento buyers at convenience stores are men from their teens to their 30s. The data say men love pork and kimchi stir-fry when eating out. To gain an edge, this chain adds a fried egg on top. My job is just like that. If you add an egg, the cost per box goes up only about 31, but sales can rise by 10%, though you also have to add the cost of installing egg frying gear. I have to gather a mountain of data and bury my head in calculations. I throw myself into everything. Back in college, my professor even told me to stop being so diligent. Seeing how moved he was, Lee Jung-ho handed Lee Dong-jin a tissue. Then he said, "My family's scattered. I sent my son back to the countryside to be raised by his uncle, and my daughter to an aunt I'd never met to take her in. My wife drifts from Jimjilbang to Jimjilbang to sleep. I worked my guts out so I wouldn't be ashamed before my kids. But it all shattered in an instant. At my age, I don't have the strength to start over." I stood staring at the Han River and wanted to end it. But then I felt a surge of outrage, so I set out to find whoever built Sehan Bank's lending system. "When I saw your picture, I wanted to drag you down to the grave with me, but laughably, now you're the one saving my life." Lee Dong-jin apologized. "I truly never meant any harm." The next day, Detective Kim Dong-hup investigated a break-in. When his partner asked the homeowner whether she'd recently broken up or fought with anyone, she looked cornered, so Dong-hup signaled the junior not to press and told the woman to find a place to stay for now. Escorting her out, he advised Ms. Juna, "Request protective services from the police. You can install a camera or use a smartwatch. Press the button if you feel in danger, and the nearest officer or the officer in charge will come immediately." She asked to name Dong-hup as her protective officer. He then brought her to her mother. Juna fell into her mother's arms, sobbing in fear. That evening, Lee Dong-jin waited outside the precinct to see Dong-hup. When the junior asked about the bruises on his face, Lee Dong-jin dodged the question and invited Dong-hup to eat. The junior took his leave. Walking together, Dong-hup couldn't help asking about the bruises, but Lee Dong-jin only said he deserved the beating. As he hesitated over what to eat, Dong-hup received a protection alert from the victim. He apologized, dashed off, snapped the emergency light onto his car, and sped to Juna's address. On arrival, he introduced himself as Juna's protective officer, but a patrolman bristled that the detective had come too late. Juna was wheeled out, unconscious, bleeding heavily. As she was loaded into the ambulance, her father grabbed Dong-hup. "Why did you only drag yourself here now to protect my daughter?" His wife pulled him back, and Dong-hup could only apologize. The next day, the analyst met Chairman Lee, having been promised a meal. The chairman showed him how to enjoy knife-cut red bean noodles properly. After the food, they talked over coffee. He dismissed his staff so they could speak alone. Lee Dong-jin produced a dossier on Mr. Lee Jung-ho. "As you taught me," he said, "not everything in life can be computed. This man was caught up and harmed because of me. If possible, please give him a menial job at the casino." The chairman promised to help. These days, people live by, every man for himself, yet you still want to pull others up. You're the kind of person who makes me curious. That night, Park Mi-jung was working when her alarm chimed at 2:30 a.m., the hour when the streets are emptiest, and she allows herself to go out. Walking a stretch, she noticed the streetlight no longer flickered. She headed to her usual spot to feed the strays, puzzled that the cats swarmed her the moment they saw her, making her feel like a real witch. Lee Dong-jin hid behind a wall, watching. It felt as if Park Mi-jung were a princess cursed and shut up in a tower. She had lost her own life. He resolved to find a way. Whatever it took, he would break the curse and return the everyday life she had lost. The next day, he drove back to Tae-baek, his hometown. He decided to return to the starting line, the birthplace of them both, and lift the curse on Park Mi-jung from there. On the way to see an old classmate, he passed his mother's former shop and in a flash saw her inside straightening the shelves. His heart ached, but he went on. He entered a flower shop and met H. He'd gathered old friends for a reunion, not just his close pals, but even Seo Da-eun from the literature club, now a night school literature teacher who had moved back to TB. Just as he was about to leave, Han asked why he was bringing everyone together. "I'll explain when we're all here tomorrow," he said. Then he drove to Mi-dong High. Stepping onto the athletic field, he remembered the small figure of Park Mi-jung long ago. He opened the equipment shed, went inside, and felt certain that amid all this data there had to be what he needed. Before coming to the school's storeroom, he had stopped by the village headman to retrieve his house keys. The headman also mentioned that a resort would soon be built around Park Mi-jung's old neighborhood and asked if he wanted to sell, since prices were rising. But Lee Dong-jin cared less about land than about whether anyone had been hurt nearby. The headman said that since Park Mi-jung left, no accidents had occurred. The last misfortune was when Hoong-gil was gored by a wild boar and hospitalized. Lee Dong-jin asked for Hoong-gil's address, went straight to his dojang to talk and record, and learned the truth. One night, Hoong-gil had brought bread to Park Mi-jung's house, worried she wasn't caring for herself after her father's sudden death. But though he liked her, he hadn't dared say so. He had hovered outside and left, only to run smack into a wild boar at the door and flee for his life. With that, Lee Dong-jin had some leads. That night, he gathered with the old crowd. At the mere mention of Park Mi-jung's name, the air tightened. Everyone grew wary and afraid, treating her like a jinxed witch. They recalled that Hong Mo, a boy from 7th grade, had given her candy and then been hit by a car, and on crutches for a whole term. Once recovered, he moved away at once. Other boys at school had met similar accidents. Lee Dong-jin tried to explain it was likely all coincidence, and told them about chancing upon her on the train. He'd thought she was living peacefully. But in fact, each day she lived on guard, avoiding people's eyes, unable to have an ordinary life. When he finished, the group fell silent, unsure how to respond. Then Seo Da-eun spoke up. What did he want them to do? "Help me collect data on the accidents around Park Mi-jung," he said. The next day, Lee Dong-jin drove to Mi-dong High to meet Seo Da-eun because she taught there and could easily open the storeroom and let him search the records. He began rifling through everything to find what he needed. After a while, he discovered the ledger listing the classmates who had been with Park Mi-jung then, along with the rosters of other classes. Lee Dong-jin carefully photographed every page without missing a single one. He uploaded them to his computer and began organizing the data. Most of the school accidents had happened during the period when Park Mi-jung was still attending. He focused on categorizing the injured boys from minor to severe, then looked up their information and addresses. With a friend's help, Lee Dong-jin found the address of Do-hun, a childhood friend who had interacted with Mi-jung. That friend led Lee Dong-jin to Do-hun. Listening to him reminisce, when they were small, Do-hun would tease Park Mi-jung, probably because he liked her but didn't dare say so, once even cutting the rope while she was playing, only to fall into a manhole himself. Next, Lee Dong-jin got the address of Hong Mo thanks to his buddy Ho Dong's tip. He immediately drove to the apartment block where Hong Mo lived and knocked door to door until he found the right unit. When he learned Lee Dong-jin was Ho Dong's friend, Hong Mo asked him to wait a bit at the playground. A moment later, Hong Mo came down and recounted that back in middle school on White Day, he had brought candy to give Park Mi-jung. After giving it, he pedaled into the street and was hit by a car, breaking a bone. By Lee Dong-jin's reckoning, Hong Mo had been at Park Mi-jung's place for 10 minutes. After that, Lee Dong-jin went to a construction site to find John Yul. According to John Yul, on a school camping trip he had brought water and struck up a conversation with Park Mi-jung, but before he could confess, she ran off, and he later had an accident and broke his ankle. Thinking back, Jun So still got goosebumps and joked that if he had actually confessed then, he might have died. In this way, Lee Dong-jin kept interviewing the boys who had met with accidents at school that year. The common thread was that all were connected to Park Mi-jung and had feelings for her. He then went into a classroom and used a tape measure to take distances from top to bottom and left to right. After measuring both inside the room and out in the corridor, he returned home and sorted the data he had gathered. he arranged the boys from minor injury to death. From this, he detected a general pattern and posited a model for the accidents. First, being in the same space as Park Emi-jung was dangerous. Second, talking with her was dangerous. Third, merely knowing her was even more dangerous. Fourth, confessing to her was extremely dangerous. Finally, if all the above rules were violated, death was certain. The shared condition of these rules was having feelings for Park Emi-jung. While he was mulling this over, the doorbell rang. Lee Dong-jin opened the door to find Seo Da-yeon visiting. They went inside and talked. After a silence, she confessed that she had been the one to start the rumor that Park Emi-jung was a witch, because at the time she liked the senior Woo Jung, but saw him being close to Park Emi-jung. Out of jealousy and resentment, she had spread malicious gossip more than once. On the day Park Emi-jung stopped coming to school, she had burned with remorse. She asked that if he met Park Emi-jung, he would convey her apology. Hearing that, Lee Dong-jin said an apology should be spoken by the person herself. Seo Da-yeon could only bow her head. She did not yet have the courage. Perhaps someday, but not now. After confessing, she told Lee Dong-jin what she knew about the senior Woo Jung. Rumor had it he had attended Hankook University with Park Emi-jung. The next day, Lee Dong-jin packed up and drove up to X. He went to Woo Jung's company and patiently waited to see him. When Woo Jung returned, the two went into his office to talk. But when Lee Dong-jin brought up the hornet sting at the church or college memories with Park Emi-jung, Woo Jung only smiled awkwardly and shook his head, saying he couldn't recall clearly because it was all too long ago. Leaving the company, Lee Dong-jin went to a cinema to find the drunk young man from the train. By his account, he often went to late showings at the theater. Bit by bit, the CKER developed feelings for her. Though the young man had met every rule Lee Dong-jin had formulated, he still hadn't died, only nearly died of a heart attack and was taken to the hospital in time. Thinking a moment, Lee Dong-jin noticed his name tag. It turned out the theater staff used an alias, and Park Emi-jung knew only that alias and not his real name. Spotting the key point, Lee Dong-jin wrote down a new rule. If Park Emi-jung learns a man's real name, his life will be in danger. That night, he decided to verify the danger radius by measuring the distance from his unit to Park Emi-jung's. He wanted to know at what distance danger began. The measurements showed a danger range of about 10 meters. From his place to her rooftop balcony was 8 meters, while straight into her room exceeded 10. When he finished and went to reel in the tape, it jammed. A prickle of unease rose, and he yanked the tape back and shut the window, just as Emi-jung stepped out, coffee in hand, slowly watching the snow fall, pacing her tiny space, unaware she was being watched. From afar, he kept silently observing her. In that moment, the tape suddenly snapped back and whisked across his neck, leaving a stinging cut. That sharp slash confirmed beyond doubt that the danger radius was exactly 10 meters. He slowly stepped back and amended the first rule. Being within 10 meters of Park Emi-jung is dangerous. Now he better understood the prerequisites of his hypothesis. The next morning, while Park Emi-jung was planting potatoes, the landlady aunt came by to ask after her. After some roundabout talk, she came to the point and urged Park Emi-jung to go on a blind date. But because of her curse, Park Emi-jung didn't know how to explain in a way the woman would understand. Luckily, Ms. Yuseo appeared in time to cut in and deftly send the auntie off. Then Yuseo curled up under a blanket and floated the idea of opening a noodle shop together. She said that working at the TV station and doing things she didn't like every day wasn't much fun. It was clear she was bored and looking for a new job. But Park Emi-jung only teased her and went to the kitchen to cook noodles. Meanwhile, Juna's mother was looking in at her daughter in isolation when a nurse came to say someone was waiting to see her outside. She went out to find Detective Dunghup. They spoke outside. Juna's mother said that every time she saw the police it hurt more, knowing that scoundrel still hadn't been caught, and she feared more and more for her daughter's safety. Hearing this, Dunghup understood. He only urged her to care for her health and took his leave. When she turned back, she found the officer had left a pair of gloves for her. As soon as Dong-hup returned to the precinct, the junior handed him a request for the suspect's information along with the license plate of a car registered to the suspect's father. Without hesitation, Dong-hup ordered a bolo on the vehicle. No sooner had he spoken than the captain walked in, sighed, and apologized that he couldn't cover for him with the higher-ups, so now Dong-hup would have to write a report. The next day, Woo-soo learned her boss had resigned and stormed in to ask why. He said he was quitting to farm greens and raise fish back home, and mentioned that someone had been looking for Woo-soo and would be waiting at the cafe near the office. Woo-soo went to the cafe and met Lee Dong-jin. At first, she suspected he was a scammer, or even a creep-stalking Park Ma-jung, and kept her guard up. To avoid misunderstanding, he explained that he had heard from the senior Woo Jung that she was the person closest to Park Ma-jung, so he had come to gather more information. He showed her the data on the accidents linked to Park Ma-jung, and after reading it, she began to believe him. When she asked why he was trying so hard, he said he wanted to restore a normal life to Park Ma-jung. Hearing this, Woo-soo felt a pang of kinship. She too had tried to pull Park Ma-jung out of the mire. But nothing had worked, so she hoped Lee Dong-jin would be the person she had The Young wished for. Someone who could draw Park Ma-jung out at last. Then, Woo-soo began to tell everything from their college days. She had been the English Department Student Union president. Park Ma-jung always dressed darkly to avoid attention, but it backfired, and the male students thought her look was mysterious. Even the senior Woo Jung, on meeting her again, seemed distant, as if worried about running into someone he didn't want to see. A boy who liked Park Ma-jung even borrowed a pen to have an excuse to ask for her number when he returned it, but she quickly dodged and left. Woo-soo herself had a strange feeling about her, as if moved and wanting to know her, almost as if she had known Park Ma-jung for a long time. As time went by to the end of the term, even though Park Ma-jung kept avoiding him, the student who had once asked for her number still trailed her and even asked her to go to the movies. When she refused, he hurried after her, tripped on the stairs, and broke his leg. After that, with his leg in a cast, the boy still hobbled to the English club. Seeing this, Woo-soo asked what had happened and learned he'd fallen on the stairs chasing Park Ma-jung. Other students piled on that plenty of boys were crazy about her, that even an English lecturer was head over heels, and that the recent accidents on campus were rumored to be because of Ma-jung. The senior Woo Jung even said that back in high school she had caused accidents for many boys. That made Woo-soo angrier. What kind of men spread rumors about a girl? Worse, Woo Jung didn't just talk behind her back, but brazenly declared in front of everyone, with Park Ma-jung nearby, that she was a witch who brought bad luck. It all came to a head on the English final. When she finished and handed in her paper, the lecturer called her back and wrote, "I love you" on it. Terrified, she ran outside and immediately dialed emergency services, sensing the teacher might meet with misfortune. But the operator thought she was pranking and hung up. As she was about to leave, Woo-soo appeared from nowhere, begged her to eat, or at least talk for 3 minutes, then looked up and saw the lecturer sitting on the window ledge, watching Park Ma-jung. A brick at the sill gave way, and the lecturer plunged to the courtyard. Horrified, Woo-soo hugged Park Ma-jung tight, so she would not see, and soothed her that everything would be okay. After the teacher's accident, the rumor that Park Ma-jung was a witch was no longer a rumor, but a fact everyone asserted. Unable to endure, she quit school. It took Woo-soo a long time to find where she was staying, a bleak place on the verge of demolition. Despite Woo-soo's concern and questions, Park Ma-jung stayed cold and asked her to leave. So Woo-soo tore off a scrap with her phone number and walked away, hoping for a call that never came. About 3 months later, Park Ma-jung finally rang. When she rushed over, the room had been ransacked, though the intruder hadn't harmed Park Ma-jung. Woo-soo scolded her for not protecting herself, then declared she would be her older sister from now on and would not let her struggle alone. She hugged her tight, took her to rent a room from her aunt, bargained non-stop, and checked every corner to make sure it was safe, while Park Ma-jung just stood there smiling shyly. After finishing the story, Lee Dong-jin and Woo-soo went to Hankuk University. They measured the distance between where the lecturer had sat and where Park Mi-jung had stood. This case met all 5 prerequisite rules Lee Dong-jin had set. As they spoke, the senior who had crashed his bike while confessing ran up. By his account, he had tailed Park Mi-jung on his bike for 10 minutes to confess, then fell and cracked a rib. But because Mi-jung never learned his real name, he was still alive. The student who fell down the stairs chasing her had also spoken to her for 10 minutes, but only to ask her to a movie so his accident wasn't too serious. After logging those 2 data points, Yoo worried that such fragmented memories might not reduce variable error. Lee Dong-jin said there was only one way to test the rule himself. He had to clarify things in person. When she asked if he liked Park Mi-jung, he answered that now he only felt pain whenever he looked at her, no longer the simple joy from before. The next day, thanks to Yoo-soo's tip, Lee Dong-jin learned that every Tuesday, a supermarket courier delivered to Park Mi-jung's home, so he went to that market to ask for a job. Seeing an overqualified resume, the owner grew anxious, but guessed he had his reasons and hired him for Tuesdays. On his first delivery day, he rode to her building and went straight to her floor. From that moment, he entered the 10-meter danger zone. He could not stay more than 10 minutes. He started the timer, and at exactly 10 minutes rang the bell, asking for a signature so she would have to come out. With Park Mi-jung standing right before him, and after weeks of observing her habits, he knew her day started near noon. She had a late breakfast, stretched on the rooftop, then worked from 1 p.m. translating broadcast content and publications. She took a coffee and reading break on the rooftop, ate instant noodles or ready meals to save time, then worked until midnight. At 2:30 a.m., when streets were empty, she fed the strays, the only time she went out. Sometimes Yoo visited, the only outsider she saw. Once a month, she took a random bus to the last stop and back. That was her trip. And every Tuesday, the supermarket delivered. Seizing that, he'd become the courier. Before his shift, he stopped at an outdoors shop and bought a cheap beginner's helmet. When her Tuesday order came in, he packed it and set off. The chance to see her up close even for 10 minutes was worth it. When she opened the door, he froze, then recovered, carried the box upstairs for courtesy, and sat to check the items to buy time. She didn't have the heart to refuse, waited for him to finish, paid, signed, and he hurried off. She followed to thank him for checking so carefully. He sprinted out, checked his watch, and relaxed. Under 10 minutes. From then on, he decided to verify the 10-minute law. Each night, he went up to her floor and ran the timer. Under 10 minutes, no danger, so he tested staying longer. As predicted, the moment he headed down, he slipped and twisted his foot, ending up at the hospital. He refined Rule 1. Within 10 meters of Park Mi-jung for more than 10 minutes leads to danger. A few days later, he delivered again on Tuesday, reading off the items for her to check. The ceiling light went out, so he waved to trigger it and continued. By the time they finished, it was 6 minutes. This time she offered a card, but he'd forgotten the reader. So she went to get cash, and he prayed outside not to exceed 10 minutes. As soon as he got the money, he bolted down the stairs, still under 10. But he nearly collided with another courier. Thinking all was fine, a sign above shook loose and fell on him. He injured his arm and had to be hospitalized. Still, he kept analyzing. Why the injury if he'd obeyed Rule 1? After a moment, he guessed the number of words spoken in the exchange might matter. As he pondered, the doctor came in to check the injury and flex the joint to see if it had set. At the same time, Park Mi-jung heard a delivery had come. She grabbed a bottled drink and went downstairs, only to find it wasn't the careful courier. She felt a pang and carried the box up herself, checking the items alone and waving to trigger the light. After that arm injury, Lee Dong-jin decided to stop by the shop and buy a more expensive, sturdier helmet. He picked up full protective gear for riders, put it on and fastened everything tight, then went to his supermarket shift. As he was stocking, he began advising the owner on how to raise revenue and drive foot traffic by using data analyses he had done while consulting on retail strategy for big chains. No sooner had he finished than Park Mi-jung called in an order. He delivered and carried the box upstairs. This time, he carefully counted how many sentences he spoke while checking the items. The two of them even waved up to trigger the light, as if by habit. From the start of checking to taking payment, he spoke a total of 8 sentences. Just as he was about to leave, Park Emi-jung, worried, asked about the injury to his arm. Not wanting her to think it was her fault, he lied that he'd been hurt working out, and in saying so forgot how many sentences he had uttered. He hurried down the stairs, glanced at the sign above the entrance, mercifully bolted down tight this time, breathed easier, and rode off. But almost at once he lost control, crashed, and skidded across the road. Thus, Rule 2 was revised. Speaking with Emi-jung for more than 10 sentences leads to danger. A little later, bandaged head to toe at the hospital, he was scolded at length by Yoo-soo for acting without thinking, and urged to abandon this plan to approach Emi-jung if he valued his life. He only smiled it off. Giving up was not so easy. After saying all she could, Yoo-soo turned and left. A long time passed. His injuries healed. It was the day of the month when Park Emi-jung took her bus trip. Lee Dong-jin decided to tail her. He wanted to look at the city alongside the girl he liked. He boarded and took the back row. By diagonal, the distance between them was about 11 meters, so nothing dangerous should happen. The bus rolled on. Park Emi-jung began to take in the sights, while Lee Dong-jin quietly watched the beautiful girl from behind. Time slipped by. The route neared its end. He began to feel reluctant, wishing for a bit of traffic to stretch things out. Then, the unexpected happened. At the last stop, seeing an elderly lady board, Park Emi-jung gave up her seat and went to stand on the lower platform. Lee Dong-jin anxiously started the timer. The distance between them was now under 5 meters. He thought he could get off at the next stop, but the bus got stuck on a bridge, unable to move. Rain fell. Thunder cracked all around. Restless, he scanned the bus for hazards and saw a truck beside them loaded with jagged metal. He stared at the truck, then at his watch. 9 minutes. If he didn't get out of the 10-meter radius, death was a real possibility. He decided to climb out the bus window, despite others trying to stop him. As he stood, the wind whipped his cap away. Park Emi-jung recognized the familiar face, slid a window open and called his name, Lee Dong-jin. Hearing it, he knew he had just violated multiple rules, but he had prepared and had nothing to fear. He clambered onto the bridge rail. Statistically, lightning never strikes the river, so jumping would be safest. He glanced back at Park Emi-jung for a moment and leapt, to the horror of everyone. The reason she knew his name was that, on the day of the memorial for the ill-fated student, while others joked and didn't care, only Lee Dong-jin stood in earnest silence. Park Emi-jung looked at the name tag of the bespectacled boy and learned his name. Since then, they had kept crossing paths by chance, fleetingly, but many times. She had never clearly seen his face. Only when she looked at the yearbook that Seo Da-in left did she see it. And 10 years later, that face appeared before her again, this time as she watched him jump into the river. Luckily, an ambulance arrived at once and took Lee Dong-jin to the hospital. Yoo-soo at work got the call from responders and rushed out to see what reckless stunt he'd pulled now. Park Emi-jung, meanwhile, went home and searched news of the man who jumped off a bridge. After reading that he was okay, she finally relaxed. At that moment, Lee Dong-jin opened his eyes on a hospital bed to find his detective friend tidying up. Seeing him awake, Kim Dong-hup began to scold him. What kind of person jumps off a bridge like that? And right then, Yoo-soo burst in, loudly berating Lee Dong-jin, startling the detective, who left to handle admission paperwork. Yoo-soo stayed and kept scolding him for courting danger. He could only beg her to help him one last time. He wanted to know the final variable. Up to now, everyone who had feelings for Park Emi-jung had faced danger. So what about Park Emi-jung herself? If she truly had feelings for someone, would the variable change? He asked Yoo-soo to ask Park Emi-jung about it on his behalf. The next day, Yoo-soo parked outside the building to wait, because the two had decided to go camping together. Though it was cold, Park Emi-jung couldn't refuse her. They went to the campsite, sipped hot coffee, and talked. Yoo-soo covertly called Lee Dong-jin, set the phone down so he could listen, and asked whether Park Emi-jung had ever liked anyone. Shy, she said she had. An upperclassman she often saw at church. Because of him, she went more often. But one day she heard he had epilepsy, overhearing a conversation between Woo Jung and the pharmacist at the drugstore. He had looked uneasy, slipped the medicine into his pocket, and left. Time flew. She didn't speak to Young after that. She thought he would simply keep quiet and go up to Seoul to study, but Woo Jung struck up a conversation with her at church and gave her an English grammar notebook he'd written himself, then had a seizure and was rushed to the hospital. Worried, she bought epilepsy medicine and went to his house to give it to Woo Jung, but lacked the courage and left without a word. As soon as he was discharged, Woo Jung left the village without seeing anyone. Years later, she met him again at university. But when she mentioned the grammar notebook, Woo Jung said he remembered nothing and hurried off. From then on, she decided to let go of her feelings for him. Hearing this, Yoo-soo realized it was the very man who had spread nasty rumors about Park Emi-jung back in college. She couldn't understand how Emi-jung's taste had fixed on him. Strangely, though Woo Jung had violated many of the rules, he was still alive, so Yoo-soo kept probing, mapping each of Lee Dong-jin's rules: distance, time spent, whether there had been a confession. Park Emi-jung said they had been together in church a long time, had talked a lot, and he had given her the grammar notebook. At that, Lee Dong-jin remembered something, hurried home, dug out Woo Jung's grammar book, and flipped to the last page. Just as he'd suspected, a confession was written there at the end. The next day, Lee Dong-jin sat waiting in Woo Jung's office. When he arrived, Lee Dong-jin began pressing him. "There aren't hornets in winter, so why did you claim you were stung?" Woo Jung replied that by the time he came to, everyone was already gossiping, so he chose to keep quiet. He hadn't been stung at all. Park Emi-jung had lied so the truth wouldn't get out. Back then, he was deeply ashamed of his epilepsy and didn't want anyone to know or witness it. "I do owe her thanks for covering for me," he said, "but it's not like I asked her to, so I don't owe a debt." Fury rose in Lee Dong-jin at the senior's shamelessness. By the rules, he should have died long ago, having even confessed to Park Emi-jung. Woo Jung froze and denied confessing. Lee Dong-jin produced the grammar notebook. He had gotten it by shadowing Park Emi-jung when she took out the trash, waiting until she went upstairs, then retrieving the book, and when Woo Jung turned to the last page and saw his own handwriting, he admitted he had liked her when young, but had been afraid of her knowing about his epilepsy. "It's unfair," Lee Dong-jin said. "I barely speak a few words to her and end up battered like this. Why are you the exception who escapes the rules? You have no right to be Park Emi-jung's variable." As he moved to leave, Woo Jung asked, "Do you think you have the right? If your rules are true, you're the one who should die. Stop while you still can." Lee Dong-jin said nothing, opened the door, and walked out. He drove home exhausted, went up to his room, and thought at his computer until night. Then he wrote his own information on sticky notes, stuck his photo on the board with tears in his eyes, and went to the window to look toward Park Emi-jung. If he stopped now, he told himself, he'd be nothing but a stalker, only adding to her suffering. The final variable was the girl's own feelings. Only the one whom Park Emi-jung loves can break every rule unscathed. He realized the only way was to make Emi-jung love him. He decided to stake everything on that last variable. He stripped down the board, notes and photos of all the injured boys, even Emi-jung's photo, and put away the analysis. He tabbed the spines of every book she had translated, then, day after day, began running and working out in earnest. Whenever his resolve flagged, he looked at Emi-jung through the window, drew strength and kept training. He packed his belongings and clothes neatly into a suitcase. Before going to see her, he texted his best friend and Yoo-soo a final goodbye, then wrote Saons on the window with a pen and drew the curtain. As he opened the door, his phone rang. Even so, he closed the door, pulled his suitcase, and left the phone inside. He took in the neighborhood, then headed for Park Emi-jung's building. He left the suitcase downstairs, started his timer, and went up to ring. They stood on the rooftop, 10 meters apart. Using his fingers, he counted the sentences he spoke. He had trained his body hard so he could voice his heart to Park Emi-jung. Hearing him, she grew anxious and begged him not to say anything. He went on. None of this was her fault. He took a small gift box from his pocket, set it on the ground, and said, "Friends in TAE Bake sent this to you. I have so much I want to say, but I won't say it today." His hand clenched. 10 sentences reached. He turned to go, then looked back. "Mei-jung, just do whatever you like. You'll be okay. Then he hurried off. This time he'd let one sentence too many slip. He reached the stairwell just as the watch showed 9 minutes. The road ahead was still long. Gripping his suitcase handle, he scanned around. Danger could be anywhere, but he was no longer so afraid. As he started forward, a truck barreled up from behind. Back inside, Park Mi-jung opened the little gift box from Lee Dong-jin, a USB drive. She plugged it in and saw photos of every corner of her old house in the village. He had gone there and photographed each scene for her, as if everything were still tidy, undisturbed. Attached to the images was a video from Seo Dayen, an apology for her rashness in youth, asking forgiveness and hoping Mi-jung would find a better name than witch. When it ended, Park Mi-jung couldn't hold back her tears. Meanwhile, Lee Dong-jin's message arrived for Kim Dong-hup, but he was on a collar and had left his phone in the car. He and his junior hit an internet cafe to find the culprit. He went in the front while the junior covered the back to block Monkey. Hearing the police had come, the suspect headed for the rear exit, not knowing Officer Han-woo was waiting. Before any words were exchanged, Monkey bolted. He dashed outside and jumped into a car to flee, but Han-woo leapt aboard and grabbed him. Monkey fought hard, even striking the officer, and ran again. The chase grew heated. Kim Dong-hup looped around to cut him off. He caught up, but the suspect still resisted, smashing a beer bottle to wield as a weapon. After being subdued, Monkey stabbed the jagged glass into the officer's thigh and tried to run, only to be tackled by Kim Dong-hup. He struck him while shouting, "You're under emergency arrest for stalking and attempted murder of Juna." Even handcuffed, Monkey taunted him. Dong-hup, furious, kept hitting the piece of trash despite his junior's attempts to stop him. The next day, the captain grimly showed Kim Dong-hup photos of the suspect's bruises. This looked like abusing authority to assault a detainee. Internal Affairs would not let it slide. He knew Dong-hup had acted out of guilt toward the victim, but some things are beyond our control. He set a consoling hand on his shoulder and left. A little later, Kim Dong-hup went to the hospital to bring Juna's mother the good news. Overjoyed, she bowed thanks and asked him to come in to tell her daughter himself. He declined and turned away. After the hospital, he went back to the precinct to train. As he worked out, Han-woo came in to congratulate him on a transfer to the cyber unit. No more pounding the pavement in the sun. While they talked, Soo-hyun arrived with the transfer forms for his signature. She'd even brought him a drink before hurrying off. Before he could make sense of it, Usoo came to see him, and they sat down to talk. She reminded him they had met at the hospital while visiting Lee Dong-jin. Stone-faced, he asked her to get to the point. She handed over her card and asked whether he had reached Lee Dong-jin. He said that when he got the text from Lee Dong-jin, he finished the caller and called back, but no one picked up. Hearing that, Usoo could only throw up her hands. How could he sit there calm when his friend had gone silent for half a month? What kind of best friend was that? What if Lee Dong-jin had vanished or died somewhere? Kim Dong-hup said you can't always be calling. People get busy and don't touch their phones. He dialed. The line rang, so he concluded his friend was fine. Usoo was speechless and felt sorry for Lee Dong-jin for having such a friend. Afterward, Kim Dong-hup went to the canteen to eat. As he sat alone, Han-woo brought a tray and joined him, an image that reminded him of college, when Lee Dong-jin would cheerfully strike up conversation just like that. When they finished, he told his junior the first thing to do was contact the victim's family. Kim Dong-hup said Lee Dong-jin had no family and asked him to pull the most recent info on him, then sprinted out. After a while, Kim Dong-hup went to SIS Solution to ask Senior Dong-ho about Lee Dong-jin's whereabouts. He only knew that Lee Dong-jin had quit 6 months earlier, saying he had an urgent matter to resolve. "I'd never seen him like that," the senior added, then scolded Kim Dong-hup for only now learning his friend had left long ago. He also recalled that when quitting, Lee Dong-jin had asked to send the remaining belongings by courier, so Kim Dong-hup followed the delivery address to Cheonho. Before heading up to the unit where Lee Dong-jin had lived, he unknowingly walked right past Park Mi-jung. With the building manager, he went to Lee Dong-jin's door to open it with a keycard. She fretted they might find a corpse, saying she'd been uneasy from the start. He had insisted, oddly, on living on that floor. When she hesitated, Kim Dong-hup took the card and went in. Strangely, everything inside was tidy and orderly. The manager said he had pestered the part-time clerk relentlessly to secure that exact room. Hearing this, Kim Dong-hup sought out Sung Min for details. The clerk also thought Lee Dong-jin eccentric for insisting on room 602 and staying cooped up, except for one supermarket shift a week. Next, Kim Dong-hup asked the supermarket owner about Lee Dong-jin and learned the man was always covered in bruises. Most recently, he'd said he was badly injured and hospitalized and couldn't work anymore. Then he visited Chairman Lee for news. The chairman called Lee Dong-jin a very special person. Rather than using his talent to make money, he used it to help others. A man like that doesn't give up on life easily. He asked that if Kim Dong-hup met him, please pass along, thanks. Thanks to Lee Dong-jin introducing manager Jung-ho, he could finally sleep soundly, even while riding in the car. With that, the chairman said goodbye and drove off. Afterward, Kim Dong-hup returned to Lee Dong-jin's flat. He sat, opened the laptop to search, but found nothing inside except statistical software. He rose and checked the bookcase for clues. He noticed sticky tabs on the front of each book. Suddenly, the phone rang. He picked up Lee Dong-jin's phone, and before he could speak, Usu was already unloading a torrent of words, bad-mouthing the cop as hot-tempered and odd, until she realized she was talking to an officer and stopped short. He asked that they meet. There was something urgent he needed explained. He met Usu at the TV station, handed her a book from the shelf, and said Lee Dong-jin had left a clue tea here before disappearing. You can usually read a person's tastes from a shelf, but his isn't like that. Just a bunch of dusty self-help titles no one reads. The only common thread is they're all English books needing translation, and everyone was translated by the same person, Park Mi Jung. Her resume lists a travel documentary program, the very show you direct. So what's your relationship with Lee Dong-jin? The director, at a loss, asked instead, do you believe witches exist? A question that reminded him of one Lee Dong-jin had once asked him. Understanding dawned. He snatched back the book and turned to go. Usu hurried after him, demanding to know why he was leaving. I thought Lee Dong-jin would find a way to help Park Mi Jung, so I let him do those things, she said. He shot back that she had abetted pushing Lee Dong-jin into danger, and from here on, the search was his alone. At that, she said she knew why Lee Dong-jin had chosen that apartment. He stopped and looked at her. Together, they went to investigate his flat. Stepping in, she praised his neat arrangement. He, however, thought his friend had set the scene deliberately, anticipating he would come and leaving clues, of which the only one now was Park Mi Jung. Ig-ha moved to the window, pointed across. That place is Park Mi Jung's home. He went to the glass and rapped on it, noting it was thicker than a normal window. One-way glass like in police interrogation rooms. With the lights off, no one outside could see in. He switched off the lights to prove it. Usu instinctively covered herself, afraid the cop might try something. At that moment, words appeared on the pane. Shine beside you. Kim Dong-hup quickly opened the laptop and pulled up the recent browsing history. The link led to a blog. Usu sat down to explore. The header read, The Invariance of Coincidence, a familiar catchphrase of Lee Dong-jin's. Only 2 posts were public, and the latest was close to the time Lee Dong-jin had texted him. Reaching for the mouse, she accidentally touched his hand. Both ignored the awkwardness and pressed on. She read the newest post. Discoveries differ only in how close they are to the result. All belong to coincidence. I've decided to record what has happened. The first statistical report has not yet failed. Kim Dong-hup concluded his friend had made the blog to log something, so there must be a hidden post. When he clicked the private entry, the site asked for login. He entered a username based on the words on the window, but he didn't know the password. A birthday failed. Usu worried that perhaps Lee Dong-jin had given up and run off for good. Kim Dong-jin Ki-whip insisted that wasn't his friend's way back in college. Even when a probability exam posed a brutal problem, Lee Dong-jin would sit in the room working till night, and in the end he'd find the solution. His answer was always that by approaching bit by bit you'd find it. After all, the answer sits inside the question. On that hint, Kim Dong-hup reread the first statistical report line over and over, then suddenly leapt up. rifled the shelves, and found Lee Dongjin's first statistical report. He entered the student ID as the password, and the private content opened. There, Lee Dongjin had written copious dated entries documenting each time he'd been injured after contact with Park Emi-jung. Reading, they opened the wardrobe and found a heap of ruined helmets and protective gear. How many times did this madman test it? Yu Siu muttered. She had never wanted to believe Park Emi-jung was a witch. But Lee Dongjin had shown her with his own body. Belief no longer mattered. "I only hope Emi-jung can live," she said. Kim Dong-hup resolved to confront Park Emi-jung. But Lee Si-sho firmly stopped him. Learning that Lee Dongjin suffered because of her would only make Park Emi-jung shrink further into herself, maybe flee again. He relented, he wouldn't hurt her. He studied at the computer late into the night. When Yu Sulin nodded off on the summon floor, he draped a blanket over her. Suddenly, at exactly 2:30 a.m., Lee Dongjin's phone alarm rang. Kim Dong-hup looked out the window and saw Park Emi-jung getting ready to go out. He grabbed his coat and tailed her. She fed the cats as usual, while he set a 10-minute timer and stood at a distance close enough to Park Emi-jung. At the same time, Yu Siu startled awake from her nap and wondered where the cop had gone. She sat at the desk and resumed reading Lee Dongjin's research notes. Meanwhile, Kim Dong-hup began talking with Park Emi-jung. He showed his police ID so she'd know his name, then tried to chat about random things, like a pregnant cat, to stretch the conversation beyond 10 sentences. After satisfying the prerequisite rules Lee Dongjin had laid out, he said, "I believe coming near you could mean death, because I, more than anyone, know what that implies," then turned and left. Yu Theu-han noticed a spreadsheet already open on the laptop. Curiosity tugged, and she opened it. It logged the injured victims, but strangely this time, there was a woman's name. She dug through the posts on Lee Dongjin's blog and found one about Juna, the victim in the case Kim Dong-hup was handling, in which his analysis inferred that her feelings for the cop exceeded normal bounds. At once, Yu Siu realized Kim Dong-hup was a witch, like Park Emi-jung, and she rushed out to find him. Kim Dong-hup, lost in thought on the street, acknowledged to himself that he had violated every prerequisite rule Lee Dongjin had found. But an accident wouldn't happen to him, because those only struck people who had feelings for Park Emi-jung. The hypothesis was perfect down to its conditions. As he sank deeper into thought, Yu Siu called across the road. "Now I understand why Lee Dongjin left the clues for you, and you know why, don't you?" He could only keep silent. Their distance was exactly 10 meters. The next day, he visited Juna in the hospital. Seeing him, her mother stepped out to give them privacy. He apologized for not arriving quickly enough to save her. Juna said it wasn't his fault, then glanced at the hand he used to count sentences. Before he left, she said Lee Dongjin had come to see her and told her about the cop and those prerequisite rules. She insisted she didn't meet them, so he needn't worry. Relieved, he bowed and left. As Officer Hun Woo drove into the precinct, he saw the colleague who'd given Kim Dong-hup a canned drink the other day, now with one leg bandaged. When he asked why, Soo-hyun brushed it off and walked on. After visiting Juna, Kim Dong-hup stopped by Park Emi-jung's place to give her the statistical report that Lee Dongjin had failed to deliver 10 years ago. She sat on the rooftop and read every page, each analysis clear with data he had gathered. When she finished, he said, "Lee Dongjin wanted to tell you you're not a witch, and he tried to prove it with data, but that first report was riddled with errors. After deeper investigation, the truth that you are a witch only grew more evident. The more he learned, the more anxious and afraid he became." She sighed. She'd heard witch to exhaustion. He added, "Lee Dongjin has vanished. He left only a message that he was coming to you, then disappeared. So I want to hear everything that happened that day." She told the whole story, blaming herself for dragging him into danger. Then he brought her to Lee Dongjin's room. Seeing her worried eyes at having been watched so long, he said he'd arrest Lee Dongjin for stalking if she wished, but all this had been experiments to find the rules. Rather than a long explanation, he opened the laptop and the blog for her to read herself. Even so, she hesitated. She still hoped she wasn't a witch. If the result said she was, this would feel like a failed experiment. He replied that the first report had been full of errors from the start. He doesn't care if you're a witch, he's only been finding a way to love you. Now it's your turn to track Lee Dongjin. With that, he left, stepped outside. Yi looked at the two buildings and said, "So you, Lee Dongjin, your statistics are still running. You made yourself the final variable." After a pause, Park Mi-jung began reading through every trial he had logged. At last she grasped the rules he set, and where he must be now, because the answer had always been in the question. The next day, Usi waited outside the precinct for Kim Dong-hup. The moment he appeared, she launched into him, texts, calls unanswered, and where had Park Mi-jung gone, while he stayed cool and taciturn, fraying her patience. He said Lee Dongjin had chosen him for a reason, or else why record everything on the blog for him to read? Then he asked bluntly if she had feelings for him. Flustered, she dodged the question. He got the message and slid his chair farther away. He began telling his story. Strange things had happened around him since childhood. Not knowing why, but sure the cause was himself, he isolated himself. Only Lee Dongjin came close anyway, sticking to him even when he stayed cold. When he saw the witch report, he realized there were people like him, and that Lee Dongjin was trying to do something. But from the start, denying an evident phenomenon was futile. He had thought Lee Dongjin would quit, but quit wasn't in his friend's dictionary. Not understanding what surrounded him, he had chosen to shut himself off from the world, like Park Mi-jung once did. Yet by Lee Dongjin's hypothesis, there were definite rules. Reading the blog, he found his own data table, names of those heard around him. Lee Dongjin had investigated accidents around Kim Dong-hup too. He hadn't only looked at people around Park Mi-jung, he had tried to save his friend as well as the one he loved. If the rules were right, perhaps Kim Dong-hup could live more in harmony with others, and, most crucially, he had to learn to love. When he finished, he said, "If you truly have feelings for me, then I must protect you, but I need time." He smiled bashfully. She, seeing the rare sweetness in the aloof cop, smiled too. Meanwhile, Park Mi-jung stood on a boat to Hallstatt in Austria. When it docked, she wheeled her suitcase through the quaint village, then sipped a coffee while waiting to check in. On the way home, the director called Kim Dong-hup and asked why Lee Dongjin had gone so far. He said Lee Dongjin had poured his heart out for a long time and believed the other side needed time to open up. And, from the missing person file, he already knew Lee Dongjin had booked a flight to Austria. He had staked everything on his final variable and hoped Park Mi-jung would love him. After much difficulty, Lee Dongjin finally met the girl he loved in Hallstatt. They sat and talked. He conveyed his mother's apology to her. Though past the 10-minute limit, he took the risk and confessed, looking her straight in the eyes. "I love you." The sky darkened with thunder. When he finished and stood to go, she stopped him. "All this trip I've been thinking about you. Thoughts of you kept coming. Mostly worries. I looked back on myself the way you did with your data, and I found something you didn't know. Those who like me get into accidents when they are away from me, but nothing happens when they're by my side. Don't leave me, Lee Dongjin, because I love you very much." At once, the wintry gloom warmed. He stepped close and embraced the woman he loved. They held each other tight in the cold. Just then, as Kim Dong-hup stepped off a bus, he saw Usiu waiting. They spoke by phone, but she wouldn't wait any longer. She hung up and walked toward him. He kept his distance. Backing away, he couldn't yet name the feeling. He'd never felt it before. Frustrated, she boarded a bus. As the doors closed, she called, "Officer Kim Dong-hup, I really like you." The bus pulled away. On board, she berated her taste. How could she fall for such a clueless guy? Variables can be created, why wait? Stunned, he then got a text from Lee Dongjin. The final rule is never to leave her side. He called Usiu. "Get off at the next stop, you must not leave me. I'm running to you now." Hung up and sprinted after the bus. She asked the driver to stop and stepped down. They ran to each other. A car swerved away behind them. He said, "Don't leave me," and she smiled, "I won't." They stood grinning, happy. At the same time, hand in hand, Lee Dongjin and Park Mi-jung moved through the crowd. She squeezed his hand, eyes still a little anxious. "Do you think everything will be okay?" He smiled softly. "Don't worry, love is meant to be a little uneasy." Warmth rose in her chest. She was no longer afraid, knowing that with Lee Dongjin beside her she could weather any storm. They clasped hands tighter and walked quietly through the winter cold, knowing that whatever lay ahead, they would face it together with love and courage. The film ends here. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe to support us. See you in the next video.